Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayham Nabhan, a second year medical student, and today I will be explaining the electrophysiology of the heart. So, Bismillah, let's start. I would like to start with just discussing our objectives. First, we're going to talk about the cardiac conduction system. Then we're going to go and talk about the ionic gradients. Then we're going to end up by the action potential phases, which is the most important topic in today's lecture. So, if you know me, guys, in every lecture, I would like to start with a conceptual overview just to make you understand the idea much better, okay? So let's take any small ideas. So this is an action potential of a neural tissue, okay? And there is a difference with the cardiac tissue, but we're going to just talk about the definitions. So as you can see here, we have a resting membrane potential, which is just a diffusion potential of the ion gradients. So as you can see here, we have sodium, potassium, and so on, okay? Then as the sodium gets in, which is the N-word or the influx of the positive channels, or often of the positive ions, which is the sodium, gets in, the the action potential would be propagated. It goes up with an upstroke till it reaches the peak potential over here, as you can see. So what is the upstroke or the depolarization? It is just making the cell membrane less negative or more positive. بس okay. بعدين when it reaches the peak potential, it goes through repolarization, which making repolarization till it reaches the hyper repolarization. So repolarization is just making the cell membrane more negative due to the efflux of potassium ions outside the cell. Cool? Okay. And as we say that we have resting membrane potential. What if the cell membrane potential goes beyond this RMP? It is going to be called hyperrepolarization, as you can see over here. And that's it. Yani just definitions to recap what we took in foundation. Everything is good, right? So now let's go and start and dive into our topic today, which is the electrophysiology of the heart, starting with the conduction system. I think he took in Dr. Zaakif lecture that we have a conduction system inside the heart, which is an intrinsic conduction system. Yani it doesn't depend on the extrinsic nervous system, which is the spinal nerves, cervical nerves, and so on. It doesn't depend on the brain. So the first point that we have an intrinsic electric activity inside the heart, okay, and it is an autorhythmic. So it beats continuously. It doesn't stop, but if it stops, خلاص, we're gonna die. That's not Allah, okay? So the conduction system is gonna be composed of four components, I think 4 or 5 components. So starting with SA node, which is the sinoatrial node found in the cisterna terminalis over here, where the electrical signal would be initiated and then it would be propagated and relayed to the AV node through internodal pathways, okay, just for extra information, through the internodal pathways. Then it goes to the bundle of His in the intraventricular septum. Then it would be separated to the left and right bundle branches, going to the apex of the heart, as you can see here, apex of the heart, where the ventricles are going to be located. Then it would head the heart wall, going upward through Purkinje fibers, where the electrical signal would be propagated upward of the heart. Cool? That's it. So just extra information is found in your slides. If we want to measure the heart rate of the SA node, it's gonna give a reading of 60 to 100 beats per minute. If we're gonna read it on the atrioventricular node, it would give us a reading of 40 to 60 beats per minute. And if it's in Purkinje fibers, these fibers, as you can see here, okay, it would give us a 20 to 40 ppm, or the beat per minute. And you just need to memorize it. There's no any something you need to worry about. Another idea that I want to add over here, in histology, we have epicardium and endocardium.
Hello.
Epicardium,
هاي
hi,
هلا
okay,
يلا اوكي
yeah.
باي
So
سارة
the,
سارة
sorry, okay, okay. So the epicardium would be the just wait a minute. Okay. So the epicardium, which is this part, as you can see on the screen, which is this part, which is the outer layer of the heart, And the endocardium, from the name endo, so it is inside the heart. It is the intracellular lining of the heart. Okay, so as we said in the action potential that we have depolarization and repolarization. So depolarization, which making the membrane potential less negative or more positive, and repolarization make it more negative. But we start, as you can see over here, sorry, we start over here with a depolarization, then till it reaches the peak potential going into the repolarization phase. So the depolarization of the heart, okay, would start from the inside of the heart, which is the endocardium layer, okay, to the outside of the heart, which is the epicardium, right? As it makes sense, as the intrinsic conduction system is inside the heart, so it would start from the inside. But the repolarization, which is the relaxing of the heart or making it more negative, it would actually spread from the outside, which is the epicardium, to the endocardium. Easy? That's it. Okay. So as we said over here, we have an SA node and AV node. They are both pacemakers, so they would set the heart rate, okay? And they are actually slow response action potentials. As you're going to see in their action potential, they're going to have a slow depolarization phase. We're going to talk about it later on. Okay. Whereas the ventricular muscle, where we have the left and right bundle branches, Purkinje fibers, bundle first, they would have a fast action potential. That means that we have a quick depolarization. Tamam. We're going to see the graphs later on, inshallah. Tamam. So as we say that the SA node electrical signal spreads from the SA node to the AV node, and then to the bundle of first, left to right, bundle branches, then to the ventricles, and so on, as we said. But here, I want to highlight a small information about the conduction and excitation of the heart. So actually, when the electrical signal in the SA node gets initiated, it would be propagated and relayed to the atria, to the left atrium, right? So through something called Bachmann's plexus, but you don't need to know them. So the excitation of the atrium and the excitation of the ventricle through the branches, the bundle branches, there would be a delay between them. So I would ask you a question here. Yeah, I would ask you a question here. Why do we have a delay between the atrial and ventricular excitation? Could anyone answer this question? Anyone? Any by common sense. فما في حد. Okay, let's see the shot. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's correct. So more blood can go into the ventricles, as you see, as you said in the chats. So that's correct. We have a delay in the excitation between the atrium and the ventricles just to increase the blood filling in the ventricles. So then the biggest amount of blood can be pumped through the aorta to the body. Okay, and that's it. So quick question. I want someone to answer it, guys, to read it and answer it. Anyone? Quick. بسرعة بسرعة بسرعة. Any volunteer? اوكي انا راح اختار احمد مسعود. ما شاء الله، يعني شفت اسمك هنا. هو اوكي طيب ماشي. طيب اوكي you can just answer it على الشات. So what is correct about the conduction system? So as we say, the conduction system is AV bundle branches. So is it the longest delay of the cardiac impulse in the AV bundles, the lack of gap junctions in the Purkinje fibers, or the AV node inhibits the sinus node, or if sinus node fails, lower portion of the conduction system cannot act as a pacemaker? What's your answer? A, D.
Can
So
I answer?
yeah, sure.
I think it's D,
Why?
because if the sinus node it fails, nothing will happen to the heart. No
Yeah,
action potential will be propagated.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Lamar. That's correct. Because as we say that the SA naught is going to be the pacemaker of the heart. That means the electrical signal of the heart or the action potential would be initiated from that part. So if that part fails to initiate that action potential, everything below it would be, خلاص, would be done all. It's going to fail. Clear? Okay. Now let's go to the second objective, which is the cardiac ionic gradient. It is one of the most important ideas that, if you understand it, you're going to understand everything is cardiophysiology. So let's start with this beautiful picture. So let's imagine that I took it from your slides, guys. So let's imagine that this rectangle is your cardiac cell. Tamam? So we have an extracellular space and an intracellular space. Hello? And we have three ions that would make a diffusion potential in the cardiac tissue. So it would modify and facilitate the action potential as well as the resting membrane potential. Hello? Yeah. So we have sodium, we have potassium, and we have calcium. Let's start with sodium, then we're going to go potassium, calcium. So sodium, it has a concentration in the extracellular space of 140 millimolar, okay, and an intracellular concentration of 14 millimolar. Okay, as the arrow indicate that sodium goes inside the cardiac cell. I just want you to know that the sodium goes in, okay? Potassium, it goes out. Calcium, again, it goes in alongside with sodium. Hello? So this picture just tells us, we have three types of ions making potential, making diffusion potential in the membrane potential, and the sodium goes in, calcium goes in, potassium goes out. But the other part over here, as you can see, is something called the equilibrium potential of each ion. Hello? So, as you know, that the membrane potential, the resting membrane potential of the cardiac cell is going to be -40, between -40 and -60, depending on the thing. Either it's SA naught or the ventricular cells. If it's SA naught, it's going to be -40. If it's ventricular cell, it's going to be -60. حلو? حلو. But let's talk about the ventricular cells. So, let's say that the cardiac cell, okay, is just permeable to one ion. Okay, مثلا sodium. So, the membrane potential مثلا اللي هي -60 would be or would try to be close to the equilibrium potential of sodium, which is measured by the Nernst equation. You took it in foundation. You can see it over here. So when you calculate it, you're going to get +60 for sodium. Hello. So the action potential when the membrane is just permeable to sodium is going to be something close to 60, maybe 60, 65, 55, and so on. Hello and so on for potassium, calcium. As you can see, here is the equilibrium potentials of each one of them. But another idea that I would like to emphasize on, what if the cell membrane is permeable to two ions? مثلا, let's say it is permeable to sodium and potassium. حلو? And they would have different equilibrium potentials. فمثلا, the equilibrium potential of sodium is going to be +60, whereas the equilibrium potential of potassium is going to be -90. Hello? So the resting potential for the membrane, which is permeable to these two ions, would be something in between, something between +60 and something between -90. How would we calculate it? So actually, I'm going to give you مثلا a question, or the question that might come. مثلا, you have a cardiac cell which is permeable to 50%, which is 50% permeable to sodium and 50% permeable to potassium. So basically, you can just multiply the equilibrium potential of each ion with its concentration. فمثلا هنا مثلا sodium is going to be 60 times 0.5 because it's 50%. It's going to give us 30. صح؟ بعدين the -90 طبعا plus -90 times 0.5, which is going to be -45. So 30 plus -45, which is يعني راح تصير negative, so it's going to be -15. So the resting membrane potential would be something in between, which is -15. Is that clear, guys? طبعا and so on, it would be applicable on the other ions. Is it clear?
Yes, clear.
Cool. Okay, this is the transcription of what we said. Okay. And just one thing I forgot to mention, that the cardiac tissue is gonna, the cardiac tissue and the electrical properties would just depend on which ion channel is gonna be opened. As I said, if sodium is gonna be opened, it's gonna be close to positive 60, potassium is gonna be close to negative 90, calcium is gonna be close to 130. Cool? Okay. Now, let's just break it down into pieces. As I say that we have three ions, sodium, potassium, and calcium. So, and each ion would have its own channels. Let's start with the sodium channels. Sodium channels actually are rapid voltage gated. What do we mean by voltage gated? Voltage gated means that we need electricity, which is from the SA node, to propagate and open. Hello? So, the sodium channels actually would be divided into three types: closed, opened, and inactive. Tamam? The closed one would have طبعا كلهم they would have two gates, the inactivation gate and the activation gate. حلو. The closed one, where the activation gate is opened and the inactivation gate is closed, so sodium won't get in, and it would be on the resting membrane potential, which is negative 60. So as you can see in this picture down here, مثلا, this is phase 4. Hello? This is phase 4. So the sodium channels would be closed over here in a closed phase. Okay? So that's it. They're going to be opened once sodium starts to get in. You're going to ask, how would sodium get in and أصلاً the channels closed? So actually we have other channels that we're going to talk about, such as NCX, which is the sodium calcium exchanger, where slight amount of sodium gets into the cell. So this would elicit a depolarization signal, okay, leading to the opening of this channel, leading to the opening phase where the M gate and the H gate open. فعندنا هنا الصوديوم would go in, and that would lead to this rapid upstroke phase, okay, which is the depolarization أصلا. حلو? That's it. Then when it goes through repolarization, as you can see, this is great. And we're going to explain this picture in details, but now I just want you to link the things عشان تفهموا أكثر. So when we undergo, or when the cardiac cell undergo repolarization during phase 3, hello, these channels would start to close, but actually not the activation gate that would be closed. Now, the inactivation gate would be closed. What does that mean? So it won't be opened again until the action potential خلاص is totally completed. حلو? حلو. So as you can see here in phase 3, they would be in the inactive form over here. تمام? When it reaches phase 4, where the أصلا action potential خلاص is completed, they're gonna go and undergo the closed phase again. And that's it. Is it clear, guys? Here? Yes. Okay. That's cool. Alhamdulillah. Okay, now let's go to the other channels. It's an easy idea of the potassium channels. We just have three types of potassium channels. You can see here that I said no, potassium is going to be outside, is going outside. So it is an efflux. Hello. So as you can see here, potassium efflux makes the cell more negative. Why? Because we're losing positive charges from the inside of the cell. That would make it more negative from the inside. And this would be indicated over here as the repolarization phase, or phase 3. Hello? Type. There are three types actually. The first type would be the inward rectifier, or KER 2.5. You just need to memorize the name. But then you need to memorize that inward rectifier on the action potential diagram. It would be underlying as a background channel in phase 4. It would be over here and it would be over here. So it would open at phase 4, okay, at the resting membrane potential. Why? As the name says, it's an inward. So it is يعني as the opposite of يعني what we said over here. We said that potassium is going to be an efflux. Hello? So potassium would go in, and that would make a balance of positive and negative charges in the cell membrane, make it at the resting membrane potential, which is phase 4. Hello? So this is the inward rectifier. Bas. And it actually opens at negative voltages and closes once the depolarization is sought, which is the positive voltages. Let's now go to the transient outward potassium current, or the I2. Transient, from the name, transient, يعني slight amount of potassium, it's going to go outside. حلو? So, as the diagram shows here, the transient, or the I2, is going to open in phase 1 of the action potential of the ventricular action potential. So, that will lead to the efflux of potassium outside the cell. That's it. Okay? The last type, which is the delayed rectifier potassium current, as the name says, it is delayed, so it happens at the end of the action potential. It starts to open in phase 2, but the dominant action would be during phase 3, as you can see here. It is an inward, it is an outward, طبعا, efflux. So it is delayed rectifier where potassium is gonna go outside, making the cell inside more negative, which is اصلا ايش قلناها repolarization, which making the cell membrane more negative. And that's it. And as you can see over here, it closes when the cell membrane potential starts to get negative. So it starts to open when the cell membrane is positive, and it stops when it's negative. That's it for the potassium. Now going to the easiest, which is the calcium. Going to the easiest, which is the potassium channels. Okay, we have two types actually. We have T-type, which is tiny, false tiny conductance. So that means there is a slight conductance of calcium inside the cardiac cell, and it actually just found in the pacemaker tissues. What are the pacemakers? اللي هم ال SA والAV nodes. So it's not found in the ventricles, and it is also found in the atriums because they are أصلاً partially part of the SA and pacemaker nodes. Okay, so they would open once the depolarization is initiated at a membrane potential of -55, as you can see here, -55 millivolt. So when the action when the cell membrane goes and the upstroke takes place and the cell membrane potential reaches -55, the tiny conductance calcium channels would open. Why do they open? Actually, they are actually to facilitate the depolarization of the cell membrane. طبعا depolarization is mainly by sodium channels, as we said. حلو? So they facilitate sodium channels to do depolarization. بعدين they close at a membrane potential of -40. At -40 أصلا the L-type, or the large conductance long-lasting calcium channels, they open, like over here in the middle of the upstroke. They open, leading to the this upstroke of the action potential. And that's it. حلو. And they actually اصلا the L-type are found throughout the heart. So they are found in the SA node, atrial tissues, ventricular cells, Purkinje fibers, spondylophils, and so on. Yeah, as we see it. That's it. Now we're gonna go to the last two channels. They are the easiest. We have funny current and the NCX, as we say it. So funny current, as the name says, funny يعني كده داخلين بس كده يعني they just conduct a small amount of ions. But actually, I want you to understand an idea, an important idea over here. We're gonna explain it in details. The funny currents are found in the SA nodes. That's SA node and AV node. So in the pacemaker tissues, they're not found in the ventricular tissues. حلو? And they are actually slow depolarization. They would underlie the slow depolarization phase over here, as you can see before. So مثلا هنا, this is the depolarization, صح? It is going to be called a rapid depolarization because it has an upstroke. But over here, the depolarization is going slowly. It's gonna take any longer time than the ventricular action potential takes. Hello? So this slow depolarization would be underlined with these funny current channels. These funny current channels are actually permeable to two ions, to sodium and potassium. Hello? So the potential of this channel, of this current, would be something in between, as we said previously. It would be مثلا -50, -20, and so on. Okay? But as we said, it's permeable to sodium and potassium. But what is the final outcome of this thing? So I'm gonna tell you how to know what is the final outcome. The final outcome would depend on the driving force of the cell membrane. So how would we calculate the driving force? I think you took it in foundation that the driving force is the resting membrane potential minus the equilibrium ion potential. فمثلا هنا we have sodium and potassium. Sodium driving potassium مثلا driving force would be minus 60 minus 90, which is خلاص minus with minus is going to be positive, so it's going to be positive 30. But the driving force of sodium would be minus 60 positive 60 يعني plus 60 equals minus 120 صح, because minus مع البلس it's going to be minus, it's going to be minus 120. But and the driving force cannot be negative, so we need to take the absolute value of the driving force, which is 120. So let me ask you this question: which driving force is greater, the potassium driving force or sodium driving force? يعني سهلة I know, بس إنه يعني just want to hear your voices, guys, even in the chat. Which driving force is greater? Sodium. Yep. So yeah, that's correct. The driving force of sodium is greater. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the outcome, the final outcome of the funny current would be the inward of sodium. So these channels are mainly taking sodium from the extracellular space and take it into the cellular space. So as you can see here, as we have depolarization is indicated by the influx of sodium. So here in phase 4, slow influx of sodium would give us an initiate at the upstroke of phase 0. Hello? That's it. Another question. These funny currents, when are they going to be activated? They actually going to be activated during hyperrepolarization. What is hyperrepolarization? Hyperrepolarization, when the resting membrane potential, okay, or the membrane potential goes beyond the resting membrane potential. So مثلا هنا SA node, as I said, and the RMB is going to be negative 40, as you can see. Negative 40 is going to be the resting membrane potential of the pacemaker. So when the cell membrane goes beyond this value, يعني أقل من negative 40, this would be called hyperrepolarization. That would activate these funny currents leading to the influx of sodium. That's it. And here it's written as bicyclic A and B. Ignore it. It's not important, guys. Going to the last channel, which is the easiest one, which is the sodium calcium exchange channel, NCX, as the name tells us. And we have an exchange between sodium and calcium. So 3 sodium ions would be exchanged with 1 calcium. So sodium would go N. And we're going to have a potentiation step. What do we mean by potentiation step? Yani, this is a step that would act on this NCX, okay, and increase its activity. How is that happen? So actually, we're gonna have the sodium potassium AT base channel, where the 3 sodium ions would go outside in exchange of 2 potassium ions which go inside. So we're gonna have more sodium outside that would be exchanged with the calcium. So that would increase the ion gradient, that would facilitate the ion gradient, and the ion gradient would facilitate depolarization. Cool? Easy? Easy, inshallah. Checkpoint, guys. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions, guys, so far? Anything you want me to clarify?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So the NCX exchanger, it starts or it gets initiated when the ATPase, when the NAK ATPase works.
No, actually, the sodium potassium ATPase is always working, because also we have other ion gradients that needs for cell functioning. تمام? But NCX channel particularly, it would open during phase 3 in the action potential. Let me show it to you. Can you? Oh, not here. Yeah. Can you see here?
Yes.
Yeah. So the NCX would open over here, just to facilitate the calcium and potassium. You got it? But the
Yes.
ATP diamond, it's always opened.
Okay, but we said in the beginning that how is the influx of sodium gonna happen? It's gonna happen through the NC when it says that when it sees that there's a little bit of sodium there, then the activation gates will open, right?
Yeah, that's cool. فthey're gonna open during phase 3, okay, and continue during phase 4. بعدين هون in phase 4 they're gonna be in the closed phase صح اللي هم الصوديوم channels وينهم؟ Sorry. Yeah, the sodium channels would be in the closed phase هون during the resting membrane potential صح؟ As you can
Yes.
closed phase during the resting membrane potential phase 4. So once the NCX starts to get sodium inside, okay,
Yeah.
the sodium channels would open a little bit, leading to the influx of sodium, which is the depolarization, phase 1, phase 0.
Okay,
Got it?
so it doesn't happen at phase 4, it happens at 3. It starts at 3.
Yeah, it starts at 3, but it completes during phase 4.
Completion. Okay, okay. Thank you.
Sure. طيب, any other questions, guys? Mm, okay. If you don't have a question, I have a question. So, يلا. I'm gonna choose one of the from you guys. Any volunteer ولا أنا أختار؟ Any volunteers? No volunteers? أفا.
Can I try?
Yeah, you can. Sure.
I think
Read the question first, please.
okay. To sustain electrical activity, which of the following ionic gradients need to be present and maintained in ventricular tissues of the heart? Do I read the options or should I just choose?
Yeah, you can just choose.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's C.
C.
Yeah.
ليش? Can you explain why?
Explain why.
Mm.
Um,
If you're gonna explain it, you're gonna know it's wrong. Explain.
sure. Isn't it that the sodium and potassium gradients, they're gonna allow
But
the sodium influx during depolarization and
but
the efflux of potassium, right?
potassium goes inside or outside? Here it says,
Potassium
yeah,
outside,
outside, but sodium
sodium inside. Ah,
like
okay.
outward. So
Okay, hold on. Then it's A.
A,
I'm not sure.
we have 3 ions. 2 of them are gonna be inwardly, tamam. One of them is gonna be outwardly. But that's the answer. So
Then it's
this,
D.
yeah, exactly.
Ah,
It's
okay, okay.
صح? Because
Yeah,
sodium
okay.
is going to be it's going to go from the extracellular space inside the cell as well as calcium, but the potassium is going to go through the rectifiers and delayed and so on. They're going to go from the from inside to outside just to make it more negative. You got it?
Yes, yes, okay.
Thank you. طيب, other question. Other question. I'm going to choose from the chat. Muhammad. Muhammad, can you open your mic ولا لا? If you can't, you can just answer on the chat. So which of the following currents is not involved in generating the action potential waveform in the atrial tissue? Mm, he thinks it's C. What do you think, guys? A? What do you think, guys? A or
Maybe it's
C?
D.
Hmm? Huh? No, it's A. Because it says the atrial tissue. And as you say, that the funny currents are just found in the SA nodes or the pacemaker. SA node and AV node. صح? The atrial tissue would have the tiny conductance calcium channels. Clear? Thank you, Muhammad. طيب. Now, yeah, exactly. Because of the funny current is only found in the SA node. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, Muhammad. Okay. Now, let's go to the cardiac action potential phase. This is, guys, I want you to focus here because this is the most important part of our lecture, and most of the questions in your final are going to be from this part. Okay, so let's kick off by explaining together. I want someone to volunteer now, please. I want to explain it with you guys. I want someone to help me. Who wants to volunteer? Fortunately, no volunteers. Sad. Yalla. Ricardo? Okay. Yeah. Okay. You can open your mic.
Yes,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Yalla, Bismillah. So
Okay.
tell me the difference. Sorry. Tell me the difference between the left picture and the right picture. What can you see over here?
In the left picture, we have a slow depolarization, while in the right picture, we have a very fast depolarization.
Okay, this is the first thing. Okay. Any other things?
Here we have 3 phases. Here we have like 4 phases.
5 phases. Okay,
Five,
cool.
sorry.
Like, what about this thingy?
Yeah, we
The
don't have the SA node,
We
which
don't
is,
have the SA node. Yeah.
yeah, that's all.
Right. Right. Those are the differences I want you to know. I wanted to identify. Thank you. What's your name?
Ricardo,
Ricardo?
yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Ricardo. So now let me explain it in details. So basically, here in the SA node or in the pacemaker, we have 3 phases. حلو. And in the ventricular action potential, we have 5 phases, and they have different channels and different ion gradients and so on. Let's start with the SA node. SA naught, let's explain the phase 4. Phase 4, as Ricardo said, it is the slow depolarization phase where we have a slow influx of sodium. Okay, so we have slow sodium channels. So we have a slow influx of sodium over here, as well as the funny currents, which has a final outcome of the inward potassium conductance. Hello. So here the membrane potential would increase till it reaches the threshold, which is -40, due to the increased conductance of sodium, till it reaches the threshold where the upstroke takes place. In the upstroke, we're going to have the calcium channels alongside with the sodium channels, اللي هم slow sodium channels. These calcium channels, both of them are going to be opened. The L type and a tiny L type and tiny type. So at the tiny type, which is -55, they're going to open, okay, and they're going to close at -50, where the L type are going to open. صح؟ بعدين we reach the peak potential over here, which is the positive cell membrane potential. Then it goes repolarization until it reaches the hyperrepolarization. This repolarization, it is basically caused by potassium. As we said, potassium is always making the cell negative. So this potassium efflux would make this curve or phase 3 repolarization. That's for the SA naught. حلو. حلو. For the ventricular AB, it has more details actually. So let's just break it down one by one. Phase 4, which is here and here, okay? Phase 4, we just have one type of channels, which is the inward rectifier. حلو, which is, as we said, it acts as a background of the phase 4, which is the resting membrane potential. فعندنا هنا احنا just potassium, slight amount of potassium going inside the cell, just to balance the diffusion potentials of the ion gradients. That's it. Now we're gonna go to 0, where the rapid depolarization takes place. And actually, rapid depolarization takes place due to the opening of the fast voltage gated sodium channels. So a large amount of sodium gets into the cell, making this rapid depolarization. حلو? Till it reaches the peak potential over here. When it reaches the peak potential, we're going to have phase 1, which is the early repolarization. As you can see, it is just a slight slope of repolarization. And it is due to the transient, as we say, it is due to the transient potassium channels. So when the potassium channels open, which is the transient, opens and the potassium starts to kick off and go outside, it would make this repolarization. Then we have phase 2, which is the blood 2 phase, where we're gonna have the sodium channels, the calcium channels, but here, as it's in the ventricle, we have the L type. Hello? That's it for phase 2. طبعا the transient, they're gonna close. بعدين in phase 3, these calcium channels would close, but the delayed potassium channels, they're gonna open, and that would lead to the rapid repolarization till it reaches the resting membrane potential again. Okay, so that's يعني بس explanation, and here's the transcription of what I said. Sorry, yeah. So this is the SA node, as we say that we have three phases. Phase 0, which is the upstroke, where the L-type calcium channels open alongside with the T-type at -50 membrane potential. Then we're going to have phase 3, which is the repolarization due to delayed potassium channels. And for the phase 4, which is resting membrane potential phase, slow depolarization, where the delayed potassium channels are going to close and the funny currents would open alongside with the slow sodium channels. For the ventricular action potential, we have 5 phases, starting with phase 0, which is the upstroke, where the fast voltage-gated sodium channels open, given this upstroke, leading to this peak potential. In phase 1, which is the early repolarization, is going to be transient outward potassium channels, give us like a slow early repolarization phase, okay, indicated by phase 1. Then we're going to go to the plateau phase, where the delayed potassium channels open, hello, and the calcium channels, large calcium channels, open as well. And why do they open at the same time? They are just for balancing the ion gradients, okay? That's why we have a plateau, as you can see over here. Tamam? And as I think Lamar asked, where the NCX channels open, they actually open in phase at the beginning of phase 3, as you can see over here, they're gonna open. Hello? Phase 3, where we have a rapid repolarization due to L-type طبعا calcium channels, L-type calcium channels would close, and the delayed potassium, they're gonna open. Hello? And lastly, in phase 4, which is resting membrane potential, which is the inward rectifier as a background for the resting membrane potential. And that's it. Is it clear, guys? It is easy, inshallah. Clear, صح? So, okay, cool. Now let's go to the last idea of our lecture. It's actually an easy idea. Also, you don't need to know it in details, but you need to know this graph, okay? So as you can see here, this is the ventricular action potential. We have 3 periods: an absolute refractory period, an effective refractory period, and a relative refractory period. Let's start with the absolute refractory period, which begins with the upstroke of the action potential over here, okay? And it ends after the plateau. So it is gonna start from here till here. What does it tell us? The absolute refractory period, it just tells us there is no other action potential can be initiated, okay? So during phase 2 and 3, no other action potential can be initiated. يعني ما في أي depolarization, other depolarization. حلو. What about the relative refractory period? It is actually, it tells us another thing, but it starts after the ARP till the action potential complete. Okay, so tell here, let's say, hello. So it tells us no, another action potential can be initiated and propagated, but what? We have a condition that the stimulus should be stronger than normal. So the stimulus over here, it should be stronger than this stimulus. So another action potential can be initiated and propagated. Cool? That's it. Here we have the effective refractory period. It's written in your slides, but any the doctor doesn't bring any questions about it, but I'm just going to explain it in case. So from its name, effective. So we have an effective action potential. So an action potential can be initiated, but it cannot be propagated. So we don't have an upstroke. So during this phase, okay, after the absolute refractory period, we can have a small action potential, but it cannot be propagated like this. Okay, we don't have an upstroke. Is it clear? Yes, okay. طيب, our last checkpoint. Do you have any questions, guys, about anything we explained? Anything? Okay. طيب, a question. Which of the following currents is not involved in generating the action potential wave in the SA node tissue? Let me see your answers, please. What do you think? Okay. Any other answers? C. Cool. So Muhammad says it's C. So yes, Ricardo C. All. Okay. So actually, yeah, that's correct. Because the question says that what of the following is going to be lacking in the SA node? And as we say that the SA node doesn't have the fast. Okay, someone explained it, Aslan, so I don't need to. Yeah, because you would find it in ventricular tissue and not in the SA node. Okay, thank you, Muhammad. Exactly, that's it. For the SA node, we have slow sodium conductance channels. We don't have the fast. The fast are going to be in the ventricles. That's correct. Okay, now we have two questions. Anyone wants to answer? The first one? The first one says, which phase of the ventricular action potential over here is the membrane potential closest to the potassium equilibrium potential? I explained it in the first slides. Mm-hmm. طيب, what about during which phase of the ventricular action is going to be to the calcium? What's your answer? Two. Okay, so let's explain the first one. Okay, you ما شاء الله كلكم جاوبتوا صح? So, which phase of the ventricular action potential is going to be closest to the potassium equilibrium potential? So, as we said that the potassium, the inward rectifier, is going to be as a background always at the resting membrane potential, which is phase 4. So the answer is going to be phase 4. حلو? طيب. For the calcium, where do calcium channels open? They actually, large type calcium channels, they open at phase 2 over here, making the blood 2. So it is phase 2. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, guys. Yeah. طيب, last question. هذا يعني it's a special question. اللي بيعرف يجاوبه أسطورة صراحة. The image shows a typical action potential of a ventricular cardiac myocyte when stimulated at time 0, as you can see over here. If the cell is stimulated again during the labeled B3 over here, تمام? How will the second action potential differ from the first? يلا. Should be a golden question. Any answers? حلو والله. We have different answers. We have D and B. What do you think, guys? Is it faster upstroke or reduced amplitude? طيب, let me explain it before I answer, okay? So you can, يعني, whoever answered wrong, you're gonna أصلا make it correctly, inshallah. Let's just break it down. Here is an action potential of the ventricles. حلو? So this is the upstroke, which is phase 0. حلو? This is phase 1, yeah, transient potassium, okay? Then we have the blood 2 due to calcium. Here, B1 phase is going to be the absolute refractory period, صح? And B2 is going to be what? Is going to be the effective refractory period till it reaches the repolarization, and the repolarization completes, and the action potential is going to be completed over here. Tamam? We're going to have here what? The relative refractory period, which is between B3 and B4. But as we said, if we want another action potential to be initiated and propagated in the relative refractory period, we need to have a stronger stimuli, stronger than the normal. So what if we have it here and he said, no, it's going to be stimulated again عادي with the same stimulus. We didn't say anything. What does that tell us? مين بده يغير إجابته؟ طيب. Okay. So Muhammad and Ahmed, they answered correctly. They said no, it's D. Correct. It's gonna be with a reduced amplitude because we stimulated with the same stimulus as we stimulated the first action potential. And as we said that we need a stronger stimulus. So if we stimulated with the same action with the same stimulus, it would have a reduced amplitude. What do we mean by a reduced amplitude? يعني it won't propagate. يعني it would just have a small peak. بس. Yes. Okay, thank you so much for the explanation. And that's it. That's it pretty much. I explained everything, inshallah. And if you attend this past session, inshallah, it's going to be enough for your final. I know these slides, they have so many text and you don't need to, يعني صراحة, it is too much to read and to understand. So inshallah, this lecture is going to be sufficient for your final. Thank you so much, guys. These are my contact information. If you have any question, don't hesitate to contact me. And please scan the QR code. And thank you so much. Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, Habibi. Do you have any questions, guys? If you don't have any questions, thank you.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
And the question before, could you go back to it, please?
Yes. This one?
Yes.
Yeah.
What if the second stimulation was stronger than the first, not the same? Will it be a higher amplitude?
No, it won't be with a higher amplitude. It would be the same. عادي. We're gonna have the same action potential, but with a decreased phase fall. So it would start again home. تمام؟
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, because that's why they say, they can't get tetanized, something like that. The myocytes or the cardiac cells, and action potentials can
Yeah,
stop, right?
exactly. Yeah, what is the function of the absolute and relative refractory period? Just the cardiac tissue doesn't get tetanized.
Yes,
That's-
okay.
that- which is also the function of phase 4 command. Thank you, Ricardo, for this information. That's
Thank
cool.
you so much.
Any other questions? Nothing? Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.